Moderator of this panel. I'll be joined by four distinguished guests. So I'll first introduce each of them, and then I'll start us off by posing a few questions to get the discussion going. We'll have some time for Q&A from the audience, and then we'll wrap up with some closing remarks. So first of all, thank you to the audience for being here tonight. And also for the distinguished guests and their opening remarks that have really set the stage for this topic by highlighting the importance of MSMEs to the economy, that they are not a side story. In fact, they are a central chapter. So without further ado, I'll first introduce our panelists tonight. Joining us first, Professor Iwan Aziz, who is a professor of emerging markets within the Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management. He was the director of graduate studies of the Regional Science Program at Cornell University, where he has taught since 1992. He previously headed the Office of Regional Economic Integration at the Asian Development Bank and is an advisor to the Indonesian Central Bank, the Indonesian Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Of emerging markets within the Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management and director of the Emerging Markets Program at Cornell, where he teaches and conducts food marketing research and educational programs on the economic performance of markets and distribution systems. He has advised industry leaders and public policymakers across Asia and Africa on food marketing strategies, economic development, and the global food economy. Research Institute of Economy, Trade, and Industry. Previously, he was a senior research fellow at the Asian Development Bank Institute and associate professor of economics at George Mason University. He has written extensively on exchange rates, trade, and global imbalances, in particular the determinants of trade flows in Asia and the rest of the world, impacts of shocks on global value chains, and spillovers that result from trade. And finally, Dr. Leslie Verteramo-Chu is a research economist at the Tata Cornell Institute in the Department of Global Development at Cornell. His research areas include risk management for smallholder farmers, food value chains, and agricultural finance, all under the context of developing countries. He is the concept creator and organizer of the first hemispheric conference on smallholder producer organizations as business entities in Latin America, hosted at the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture headquarters in Costa Rica, and this event was co-sponsored by Cornell, IFAD, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, FAO, and Fontegra. So please join me in welcoming our panelists tonight. Now, just to set the stage for us a bit, I'd like to ask Willem to speak a bit more about the uncertainty around trade and global imbalances that we see today, and what that might mean for MSMEs.
Great, thank you very much, Fu. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so let me say what a great honor it is to participate in uncertainty, volatility. Tariff policy can be one thing one day and something else the next day. It's very hard to plan. It's very hard for firms. So it's a very, very foggy environment. It's very difficult. Uncertainty, that also means there's opportunities. So in Indonesia, you can have your eyes open. There are different opportunities and supply. So if you've been sending, say, shrimp to the United States might no longer be a reliable partner. So you want to diversify. You want to think, well, what other countries are there? What other markets are there? Where else can I send my products? Long-term reliable partners. And so it's not only that the business that we're sending to is reliable, but also the country that we're dealing with is reliable. Rather than to be discouraged in it's a very difficult environment, we should keep our eyes open. So people like Warren Buffett say, the more volatility there is, the more opportunities there are. Very good opportunities for MSMEs at this point, and We just need to keep our eyes open and try to find out what are those opportunities, how can we hook up with reliable business partners, and the more diversified we are, the more resilient we're going to be.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I hit the nail on the head here. The instability in markets do bring about opportunity. And that over 20 years ago, when we moved toward a global market economy, I think instability has always been a part of it. Things are certainly more volatile now today for a number of reasons. But I do think instability does provide clear opportunities for SMEs. At the same time, the challenges of finance, access to technology, managerial skills, all of those are still there. And I think this question of resilience, never before, I think, on the global stage, where SMEs are required to be even more resilient. So I think in a nutshell, instability does drive opportunities. And resilience is a cornerstone, I think, of what and we all strive for SMEs to achieve.
Make some remarks. Ralph mentioned, this period is unprecedented in terms of uncertainty. We are adding, besides the uncertainty of climate change, that now it seems that it's not the top in the negotiation table. We have the uncertainty of our trading partners. Now, coming from Mexico, and I can certainly say this for the rest of Latin America, this is a wake-up call in a way, especially for Mexico and also for the rest of Latin America. Why? Because we were relying on mostly one trading partner, and this trading partner has been very stable for so many years. It helped us grow our economy and the rest of Latin America. But these current uncertainties just made us realize that we need to diversify, but not only diversify on the north, but also look for partners that we say, like the topic of this conference, in the global south, because those partners in the global south are the ones that can have similar experiences as the SMEs in Mexico and Latin America, and we can certainly learn more from them. What are they doing? How can they cope with volatility and the rest of the uncertainty, instead of just relying on our neighbors from the north. And I think it's a great opportunity to establish this network for cooperation of SMEs.
Before saying anything is, apologize something. So let me also apologize. I think I can apologize on behalf also my other colleagues from Cornell that we are not able to attend in person this time. But hopefully next year we can come in person and we can organize a more formal kind of seminar similar to this. What I want to add is just to remind everyone about the sheer number of the SME in almost all countries around the world, both developing as well as developed countries. And since we are in Indonesia, if you can look at the number of the business in Indonesia, so if you give me 100 units of business in Indonesia, 99% are SME. And within the 99% MSME, 99% are micro, so the first M. So overall, if you give me 100 unit business in Indonesia, 98%, because 99 times 99 is 98, 98% are micro. So from any angle we look at it, and I think the minister as well as Pak Burhan mentioned about welcoming Indonesia 2045, from any angle you look at it, if we are really serious in trying to improve not only growth but also development, like health, welfare, education, and so forth. I cannot think of better than focusing on this 98% or 99% of the business unit, because they involve the largest number of the population in a way. And if we look at the area of the business, there are many dimensions here. Number one is in terms of sectors. Most of them are working in trading sectors, retail trade and so forth. And if you look at from the financial access point of view, they're also having difficulty with their financial access. And I'm pretty sure we will discuss more about that later on. So the only thing I want to add to what my colleagues already mentioned about how uncertainty is related to the SME is really the numbers. I mean, they are really the largest number of the business unit.
Supporting MSME growth and development, especially during times of uncertainty.
Okay, let me also speak not only in terms of one country like Indonesia, but Asia in general. It's so happened that I'm a bit familiar with the region. There's the bad news and the good news. So let me start with the good news. If we look at the latest report on the low medium income countries, and when I said latest, it's really last month actually, 2025 report. There's a good news in terms of the number of adults who has bank accounts. And the good news is that it has increased quite significantly over the last decade. So by now it's about 80%, almost 80%, 79 point something percent of the adult in low and medium income countries has bank account. So that's the good news. And also the number of the ownership of mobile phones, because we all know that access to finance partly can be sort of enhanced by the mobile phone. It's also increasing. In fact, the latest number now is about 15% of the population in the LMIC, low, medium, and income countries has mobile phone. So there are a number of promising and good news here. The bad news is that the access to finance is still very limited. And I cannot think of a better example than the case of Indonesia. At the density of MSME around the world, Indonesia is the highest in the world. And density is defined as the number of MSME units per 1,000 population. We have the highest number percent.
More than 85.
Now, if we look at the amount of the bank credit allocated to MSME, unfortunately, we are among the lowest. The number is between 6 and 7% over GDP. So I'm talking about the number, the size of the credit for MSME over GDP. We are among the lowest. So the way I look at it is that this gives a great opportunity in the coming years how to help increase the accessibility for financing many of those MSME in Indonesia. And if we compare with the other developing countries, I happen to be quite familiar with the case of China. One of the things that I was struck is that in China, the banking sector has been using technology in a very intensive way. In fact, the latest that I look at it is the use of AI, artificial intelligence, by the banking sector. Because we know that one of the reasons, common reasons all over the world, why SME usually cannot get sufficient amount of credit, because of the risk. And banks usually try to do a very thorough analysis about the risk of the business of the SME. And because of that, because of asymmetric information and all other factors, banks are a little bit reluctant to lend to the SME. But banks in China are now using artificial intelligence to do the evaluation. And as a result, the increased number of the SME receiving credits from the bank is increasing tremendously. So this is a good example of how technology can help improve the financial accessibility And I'm pretty sure in many countries, including Indonesia, gradually banks also adopting technology, and hopefully the use of technology is catering towards the interests of the MSME, simply because you have the largest number of this issue.
Could you share with us a bit about, what that situation looks like for micro and small enterprises across Latin America, and perhaps, a way that you've seen some companies.
Professor Yuan mentioned about asymmetric information. So in other words, asymmetric information in this context means that the SME has full information about their costs, their risk, but not the bank. So for the bank, it's very difficult to assess the probability of default or payment. Particularly critical, especially for new SME, for a startup, if you will, where in the region about 50% or more than 50% of all new SMEs, and only 6% of those new SMEs, newly created SMEs, get any form of credit, only 6%. And the reason is precisely what Professor Yuan was saying, is risk assessment, the asymmetric information. Now, this is extremely important, and some banks, some new enterprises, financial fintech companies in Latin America have taken note of this, and they have included, perhaps not AI, as sophisticated as in China, but they have looked at a low-tech way of getting more information and decreasing the risk. So one of them is just looking at doing interviews within the community, for instance, being more proactive in gathering information. And in that way, they can get information that outside of the common publicly available repositories you can find. Also, it's really important for this matter to have a way to share information among all the different public organizations, public institutions that can help banks assess risk. Now, this is extremely important. We're talking about risk, about credit risk, default risk. Now, one way to mitigate risk is, of course, with insurance. Newly created insurance product or ad hoc insurance product, they require a certain normativity. And that's, without the normativity, those products, those protection products, they become OTC financial derivatives, if you will. And that requires a different set of regulations, but not only that, if they are not within the regulation of insurance, they may not be used for banks as a way to give credit, to protect credit. So it's really important also to have the right norms, regulations, to allow these new, sophisticated, innovative index protection products to conform as an insurance, within the insurance banking regulations, to be able to so that SMEs can use them to mitigate the risk of default.
Allow what are called character loans, so that if you know the person and you trust their character, even if all of the numbers aren't totally aligned, the regulators allow loans to be made under those conditions. And I think that's something, what Leslie was saying about where you go talk to the community, you get to know the people. I think that's something that might be very helpful too, that people who you're convinced have good character, you might be more willing to make loans to. Professor Aziz asked me to talk about the trade aspects. And one of the problems with exporting is you export the goods now, but you're not paid until maybe 60 days later. So the cash flow is very, very important for these small companies. And so anything we can do to mitigate those problems would help them to export more.
And financing and perhaps what financial institutions can do.
Great.
Yeah. So now moving on to another challenge that is our MSMEs face, which is this lack of managerial skills for some. More about this challenge and
Had a program in Cape Town, South Africa for over 20 years. And in fact, it was because of that program, my understanding of SMEs and their contributions to economic development was certainly enhanced. Starting in the early 2000s, going right up to the beginning of the pandemic, 5,000 companies. And having firsthand conversations with companies about their strengthening their capacity, it was critically important for me understanding that issue. In large part because management skills and capacity strengthening is much like human capital. Parts of it is a public good, where unless a government does, no one steps in and provide that good or services. Other aspects of it is quite of a private good, where business development services agencies have entered the market for fees. But a lot of this activity has largely stepped over the boundaries and capabilities of small companies to access. So building the capacity of small companies, I really think is essential, especially if you open them up to global competition, where their competitors in the north or even in other aspects of urban areas are getting training, are getting information about strategy, about pricing, about product development. And if we're to think that that our companies in the so-called global south are going to compete effectively, I think an important part of that is not only finance, but also having the capacity to management and to strengthen your management and to facilitate strategies to achieve your goals and objectives. So I think capacity strengthening is essential, and I don't know whether we can have too much of it or not.
right, Leslie?
Thank you, Lynn. I would like to add something in the lines of what Professor Friese mentioned. Yes, capacity building is fundamental for the sustainable development, for sustainable operations of SMEs. People say, well, should it come organically within the SME, within the enterprises, or not? Capacity building comes organically, meaning within the company, within the SME, they will have enough human power, human capital to improve their capacity. That requires leadership, that requires not only technical skill, because most managers, most CEOs, if you will, of SMEs are mostly technical. But they need financial skills, business acumen, business skills. So developing capacity building within the SMEs is hard if certain conditions are not met. Well, what is happening though are capacity building through the free market, through collaborations with high value chains in developed countries. For instance, I'm more familiar with examples of agriculture, but I think it pertains to other industries as well. Now, in agriculture, it's quite common that in Latin America produces a lot of food, sells to the US, Europe, and the US or the European buyers, they come and they create networks and develop their suppliers' capacity in Latin America. That's the free. In addition to that, we can think about public-private or private-private collaboration, where public money from development banks or foundations, for instance, Walmart Foundation, provides grants to promoting organizations. Like one big example is TechnoServe. TechnoServe operates in Latin America, Africa, and Africa. Now, what they do is they identify SMEs or a group of farmers in this particular case, and they help them create a more professional management system, help them with quality certifications, and train them in all the aspects of the logistics. Now, for that, you will need a sponsor, right? So that's another way in which we can build capacity. Let me just point out one example. GIZ, the German development institution, recently created coordinated value chain in Mexico and Honduras and Guatemala. And what they did is they went to the Association of Mexican Supermarkets and created a digital platform with all the information of the supermarkets, and where farmers in Guatemala and Honduras could contact directly the supermarkets in Mexico. But not only that, but GIZ also provided funding for capacity building. So once the relationship with the Mexican supermarkets got established, they will receive technical assistance and capacity building in order to develop the value chain. So those are just examples that have been very successful, and they can certainly contribute to capacity building and the sustainability of SMEs.
If I may add two things in Asia, especially in Indonesia, because I just, finished my survey on various regions in Indonesia. We have two things here. Number one is, it is true that the capacity building and management skill are mostly organic. But I noticed that, and I'm speaking of the 98%, the micro, so not the small and medium, but the micro. I noticed that a lot of these micro enterprises, yes, they were organically not really sort of capable of improving their management skill or their financial management and things like that. But when they receive counseling, when they receive constant monitoring, and it so happened that the example of counseling and monitoring was given by the local bank. I'm talking about Indonesia. In many of the local offices of Bank Indonesia, they provide counseling to all these micro enterprises. They were really making a significant improvement in terms of capacity. So, yes, it is very organic, but it can be improved by constant counseling. But what I mean by counseling is not just giving one-shot help, but it's monitoring all the time. And over the 2 or 3 years period, they really make a significant improvement in terms of their management capacity and so forth. And the second thing is really training, because I'm pretty sure in all developing countries, government, whether it's central or local government, provide training in building many of the MSME. The problem is the design of the training program is usually doesn't match with the prevailing, for the lack of better term, the prevailing social capital among the MSME. Very clear example, simple example. The training is conducted certain hours, let's say from 10 to 12. And the training is taking place in, let's say, the office of the district leaders. In Indonesia, it's called Kabupaten. They forget that from early morning until 5 p.m., all this MSME has to work very hard just to survive. So just going through that training program itself is already mental taxing for them. So I noticed, and I spoke directly with many of them, they wish that the training can be conducted at more accessible locations as well as more appropriate time where it doesn't have to interrupt with their activities. So I'm talking about the design here. It's not the policy itself. The policy is wonderful. We can provide more training to all these MSME, but the design, speaking about actionable, because two speakers earlier mentioned about hopefully the seminar is not just talking about the discussion but also actionable. This is one of the things I think can help a lot in terms of implementation of a good policy in the context of improving the capacity building.
So Leslie and Iwan, in your responses just now, you've also essentially highlighted